Yeah, well, if you read it, you'll see what
I would like to start this evening with a land acknowledgement and to recognize that the area we call the Fraser Valley Regional District has been home to 31 different First Nations for generations. Actions and decisions made by governments in the past have left many Indigenous communities untrusting of the Canadian healthcare system. It is our collective responsibility to keep this at the forefront of our minds as we make decisions as a hospital board, since the decisions we make have a direct impact on the physical and mental well-being of all community members, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. So with that in mind, I would like to call to order the February 27th, 2025 meeting of the Hospital District Board. Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you. Looking for approval of the agenda, and late items.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Director Facio, Director Dreesen, those in favor, contrary, carried.
Item 4.1 is the draft Fraser Valley Regional Hospital District Board meeting minutes of December 12th, 2024.
Do I have a mover, Director Clute and Director Johnson? Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, those in favor, contrary, carried.
Item 5.1 is the 2025 Hospital District Annual Budget Key Assumptions. There is a motion for your consideration and two options.
Thank you.
Move option 2, Madam Chair.
Second, Director Facio, Director Horn, discussion. Director Facio?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief comment. I think this is something that we need to do in this age that we're in now, with the increase in demands that we're receiving on an annual basis, that it'd be prudent now to go with this 15% higher than 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Facio. Director Horn.
Yes, thank you. Speaking in support of the motion, I think that we have asked Fraser Health to participate in dialogue with us that moves us toward a robust and joint capital planning process. The progress has been slow, but reports from Ms. Kinnaman are that there have been some progressive steps recently. And I think given that, we should take advantage of option 2 for 2 reasons. The first is I just think it demonstrates that we're acting in good faith, that we are intending to invest in the capital infrastructure around healthcare in our area. And that gives us a little bit of leverage as well at that table, a little bit of credibility at that table. We still hold the cards in terms of when we would disperse that money. The second is I anticipate, and I think Director Facio spoke of this, we know that we're only going to see dramatic increases in healthcare needs based on the demographics and growth of the region. And I'm concerned that if we don't start to take advantage of compounding and putting some money away incrementally now, we'll be faced with the far less optimal choice of sudden changes in our funding and our call to the taxpayer.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no other comments or questions, I'll call the question. The vote will be on option 2. Those in favor, contrary, that carries.
Moving down to reports from board directors.
Any reports from directors? Welcome, Director Herrick. Thank you. Sorry. My glasses need to be cleaned.
Madam Chair, I just want to point out that Director Castle looks a little bit like he's wearing the costume of the former director this evening. So I want to also welcome former director and alternate Director Stoker.
Thank you for that. Thank you. We talked ahead of time. So thanks. Yes, Ms. Kinnaman.
So moving down to public question period for items relevant to the agenda, we'll just turn things over to our corporate officer, Jamie Van Ness.
Thank you. We don't have any members of the public joining us online. We do have one member of the public joining us today. And this would be your opportunity to ask a question relevant to the Hospital District Board agenda. And I will just note that we have not received any written questions with respect to the Hospital District Board agenda.
Thank you.
And it does not look like we have any questions from our member of the public.
Any questions from the public? No. Seeing none, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Papa, Director Facio, those in favor, contrary, carried. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving over to Chair Ross.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to recognize that the area that we call the Fraser Valley Regional District has been home to Indigenous peoples for generations. There are 31 communities with reserve lands in the FERD's jurisdiction and as many as 69 groups with interest in the area. We honor our commitment to collaboration, inclusion, and reconciliation in our work here today and call to order the February 27th meeting of the Fraser Valley Regional District Board meeting. Thank you. First item, please, Ms. Kinnaman.
Looking for approval of the agenda, addenda, and late items. And I would just note that staff are requesting to withdraw items 7.1 and 9.2. Item 7.1 is the motion from Director Patty McElhonick. She is away at this time and would like to go through the March agenda cycle. And 9.2, we have one small correction to make, so we will bring that through the next cycle as well.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, moved by Director Facio, second Director Shahal, all in favor. Motion carries. Next item.
Next is 4.1, which is a delegation from the Lower Fraser Floodplains Coalition.
Welcome. Please come to the podium.
Hello. We just have some slides that I believe are getting set up for us. Yeah. Here we go. Thank you. So hi there. Thank you for having us today to speak to you to securing a resilient future for the Lower Fraser through multi-beneficial flood management. My name is Mariah Mund, and I work for the Emergency Planning Secretariat, an organization that supports the 31 mainland Coast Salish First Nations in all phases of emergency management from mitigation to recovery. I am here with Deborah Carlson.
Yes, good evening to Chair Ross and the directors and staff. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. My name is Deborah Carlson. I'm a staff lawyer for West Coast Environmental Law. We're a not-for-profit environmental law organization, and my work with West Coast focuses mainly on issues across the Lower Fraser. I've been working with the Lower Fraser Floodplains Coalition since before November 2021, just before November 2021, actually.
And we did want to send Tribal Chief Tyrone McNeil's regrets. He was called away to Ottawa, so you get us today instead. And so, yeah, we are both members of the Lower Fraser Floodplains Coalition, and we're going to talk a little bit more about who we are in a couple slides. Before we talk about going into the future, it is important to reflect on the past and the current flood landscape. We are not going to do a complete history of flooding, and you do have access to all of these slides in the agenda, so don't have to read every single little point in there. But what we wanted to highlight were just a few moments. First, as most of you know, the Fraser River floodplain, by definition, has been flooding for as long as it has existed, until it was diked. First Nations have been here since time immemorial, and they have relied on refined techniques and practices for managing flood risk. The post-contact management of flood risk has been focused on trying to keep water out of the floodplain through diking and draining. And relying on this approach, we've seen several large devastating floods. We acknowledge efforts by folks in the region and BC to try to solve some of these challenges that are associated with flooding. The Lower Mainland Flood Management Strategy that completed last year resulted in technical studies and recommendations for action. It did not, though, produce an actual strategy. In March 2024, the provincial BC flood strategy was released, but it lacks funding, capacity, and an implementation plan. The Emergency and Disaster Management Act was updated in 2023 to encompass all 4 phases of emergency management, but regulations have not yet been developed. We also have the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, but little guidance for local governments. And so how does our work with the Lower Fraser Floodplains Coalition fit into all of this? We are a group of like-minded organizations and technical experts who are looking to support floodplain management that can help our communities thrive, restore the health of our ecosystems, and build resilience to our economies. Since 2022, the LFFC has supported First Nations and local governments convening leadership and staff to share information, build relationships, and identify shared needs and opportunities to work in more mutually beneficial ways for the region. We also advocate for the allocation of funding and resources to this region to ensure the Lower Fraser remains a priority to both the provincial and federal government. And we support technical work to fill critical knowledge gaps that have been identified, including studies on the interdependencies within our system that exacerbate risk, land scale opportunities for risk reduction, and the exploration of nature-based and other hybrid adaptation options.
Right. So stating the obvious for everyone here, I'm sure, but just to situate the work we're going to be discussing, flood management in the Lower Fraser relies on, and there's a typo here that should say 500, more than 500 kilometers of dikes and related infrastructure. But as we all know, the dikes don't meet current standards for flood hazards, not to mention seismic risks. Climate change makes it worse. The dikes are clearly unaffordable for local governments that are left holding on to them, and the funding mechanisms that we have are entirely inadequate. And we're still seeing that we haven't received the disaster recovery funds that were promised from November 2021 in our region. So how can we make our flood control infrastructure work and keep our communities safe when we face these realities? How can we respond to these challenges? Now, I'm not going to pretend actually that the Lower Fraser Floodplains Coalition can answer these questions. The flood of record was in 1894, and we've been grappling with versions of the same sets of problems ever since that time, for more than a century now. But what if we asked a different set of questions?
Instead of asking, how do we improve our dike system? A question that we could ask is, how do we protect our people, our region, and our economy in the most effective way possible? That's what this approach is about. In this case, we start with figuring out exactly what we care about in the floodplain. The example on the slides are the reflections from Mainland Coast Salish First Nations community members when asked this question. They care about access to healthy food, the structures they live and work in, a functional economy, a healthy environment, the people in their communities, and the unique and intricate ways that the community is connected. They care about their culture and the ability to steward their culture in place. Finally, they care about the critical infrastructure that makes their way of life possible. We are guessing that this might resonate with you guys as well. So the next question that we ask is, what is our flood risk? How are the things that we care about, the receptors in the previous slide, threatened by flooding? Pretty quickly, we find that flood risk is not uniform across the floodplain. Risk depends on what we care about and also where those things are. For example, you are all aware of some locations, some houses that fared better or worse during the November 2021 flood. And you can see on the left is farm properties that were flooded during the 2021 atmospheric river. And the right is the image of the Vedder River Habitat Restoration Project, where a setback dike was installed prior to the 2021 flood. And the crew who worked there, they visited the site and found that salmon were able to continue to spawn and that there was room for the water to go into some of this newly restored habitat. And finally, we need to understand how our system, our communities, and services are interconnected and interdependent. This is important because there are cascading effects to account for. And this helps us to think beyond particular infrastructure assets. It helps us to focus on the services that our community and region rely on. Rather than thinking only about keeping water away from physical infrastructure, can we plan in a way that focuses on protecting the services we rely on? For example, we need ways to be able to move people and other things across the landscape.
So when we think in this way, starting with what we care about, assessing the flood risk to those things, and thinking about the services that we rely on, we end up with a different analysis. This analysis tells us how much water we can live with and where. It provides us with a bigger, better toolbox of measures and options for flood risk reduction and the knowledge needed to identify a collaborative and strategic approach to floodplain management, how we can work better together. This includes hard infrastructure like dikes. We're not saying there wouldn't be dikes in this vision, but it also opens up many other solutions. And you probably can't see it very well on this graphic, but this is just a schematic with the many different ways that you can reduce flood risk. So some of the other solutions: green infrastructure, land use planning, flood resistant crops, flood resilient buildings, community education, preparedness, etc. All of these things take the edge off risk. And of course, we do some of these things already, but not in a systematic, strategic way across the region. Oh, it's pretty pale. So yeah, if you look down there, you'll see a better version of this photo. So what does this look like across the landscape, contrasting these two approaches? So these are two visualizations prepared by Professor Case Lockman from UBC. And so the first one is what we have now, essentially diked landscapes with very little connection to the river and waterways. And where there are people, livestock, and structures on the landward side, they are very vulnerable to flooding if the water gets in. So in this scenario, we're not using, which is where we are, we're not utilizing the whole suite of mitigation options. And this means our risk is higher because it's only a matter of time before the dike system fails again, someplace or another. The second image is an idea of what the landscape could look like with integrated flood risk management. There's more connection to the river and waterways, and we still use dikes, but there are hybrid options like setback dikes, and we do have some of these already, along with other measures designed to reduce risk. In this landscape, the region is more resilient to flooding, and these are multi-benefit actions. They have benefits for community well-being, ecosystem health, and managing other climate risks that we face, like droughts and heat waves. So this is the type of work that's already happening in floodplains around the world, including right across the border in Washington state, where communities are grappling with similar challenges and pressures, including requirements to build more housing in their urban areas. Of course, there's work required to understand risk in this way in the Lower Fraser, and then model the different solutions so that decision makers like you can weigh in on what a good path would be. But it's entirely possible and relatively affordable to do this work. And it is the desired approach that's described at a high level in the BC flood strategy that was released last year. So our group, the Lower Fraser Floodplains Coalition, and the emergency EPS, yes, are working to support some of the technical work, including developing an assessment of interdependencies across the region. And we're working to do that with the support of the Cities and Infrastructure Lab at the University of Victoria. And we're also continuing to have forums to bring together rights holders and decision makers across the region to support relationship building.
So we are very grateful to the Fraser Valley Regional District Board members who have been participating in some of the activities that we have been organizing to bring folks together to explore these issues and how to work on them. And of course, to Director Lum for his many years championing flood management in the Lower Fraser. We understand that you have recently established a flood resilience committee, which is great news, but we all need the province to commit to leadership and to resources. We encourage your committee to write to the Premier and ask him to ensure that provincial ministries have the mandate to move forward with actively supporting flood risk management actions for the Lower Fraser. We are happy to share our letter with you, and we look forward to engaging with the Flood Resilience Committee. And finally, as Deb mentioned, there is ongoing technical work, and we would like to keep in touch with you about all of that. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. And yes, please share that letter with us. Love to see it. Are there any questions for the delegation? No? Director Lum?
Just a comment more. So I've probably had more opportunity than the rest of the board members to work closely with both Deb and Mariah and all of the different folks at the LFFC. And I just want to underscore the value that this board receives from, they haven't come and asked us for any money. They've been working on this project for quite a few number of years. And just the level of technical expertise around the table that I've, had an opportunity to witness and get to listen to is incredible. They brought in some very, very highly skilled technical folks. In particular, this board would probably benefit from looking at the floodplains by design, some of the work that's gone on, they've referenced in Washington State. But if I hope the Flood Resilience Committee will have an opportunity to dig into that a little bit more. It's some incredible things that are happening all across the board. And of course, just the advocacy that we are indirectly receiving that it will benefit both the Fraser Valley and all the communities in the Lower Mainland because of the work the LFFC is doing. So just wanted to take an opportunity to thank you both and look forward to continued kind of dialogue.
Thank you, Director Lum. We appreciate your work as well. Director Horn.
Yes, I'm grateful as well. I think there are a number of moving parts in the region when it comes to dealing with this issue, including, I believe, 3 watershed tables that are in different stages of their work. And this is really more of a comment for everybody involved in those tables that at some point later, perhaps in the year, at some point, we should probably be sitting down in sort of symposium style and learning from each other and making sure we're being only redundant where it's strategically wise to do so. So I am a little concerned that we might be, if we're not aligned clearly, pulling on strings that might actually break instead of being woven together.
Thank you.
Maybe Madam Chair, sorry, and if I could help put your mind at ease, Director Horn, to a lot of the people that have participated in any of the LFFC events that I've been at are those that are engaged at the watershed tables that we are involved in as well. The one thing that another kind of plug, I guess I would say, for the LFFC is they had recognized early on the restrictions with the LMFMS just being focused solely on Fraser flood level, and they had advocated many years ago for a broader watershed look. So what they were talking about 10 years ago was what we are slowly catching up to in the approach right now, and the provincial government and other local governments are slowly catching up to the idea that this planning can't be restrictive and restricted only to one body of water. But we have to look at a systems approach and a broader watershed approach. And that's exactly what the LFFC has been advocating for since the beginning. Probably should have just listened to them back then they started.
Thank you. Director O'Donnell?
Thanks very much for your presentation. I'm also on a flood mitigation council with their board with Director Smith and with Ms. Kinnaman as well, and we had our meeting the other day, and they've talked about that with our group because we also represent the 5 First Nations of the Upper Fraser Valley. And as Mr. Smith, Director Smith always says, everything starts up there and comes down this way. So we're kind of the first to get involved in this. And so we'll also be joining you and getting together in the future. I understand there are some programs in place to put us all together at the same table as we continue this process throughout the year. So thanks very much for what you're doing. And I look forward to working with you as well.
Anyone else? No? Seeing that, thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night. All right, next item, please.
Next is 5.1, which is the draft Fraser Valley Regional District Board meeting minutes of January 30th, 2025.
Moved by Director Pranger, seconded by Director Clute. All in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Next item.
6.1 and 6.2 are committee minutes for information and matters arising.
No one wishing to speak to those? All right, next item, please.
Moving down to 8.1, we have a grant and aid request for the McConnell Creek Farmers Institute in Electoral Area F.
Moved by Director Davidson. Do we have seconder? Director Smith? Seeing no comments or questions, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next item.
8.2 is a grant and aid request for the Hemlock Valley Homeowners Association in Electoral Area C.
Moved by Director Wardenberg, seconded by Director Damo. Seeing no questions, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. Next item.
9.1 is the Fraser Valley Regional District 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan Bylaw number 1769.
Thank you. We have moved by Director Lum, seconder, second by Director Dreesen. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next time. Oh, motion number 2. Moved by Director Clute, seconded by Director Siemens. All in favor? None opposed. Motion's carried. And motion
Number 3, Madam Chair.
Director Facio. We have a seconder. Director Popov. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. Next item.
9.3 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Sub-Regional Transit Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 1757.
Motion. We have 2 motions here as well. Do we have a mover for motion number 1? Director Davidson, second by Director, what? No, it was removed from the agenda. Yeah, okay. So sorry, that was, I think the mover was Director Davidson, second Director Shahal. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carried. Motion number 2. Director Horn, second Director Lum. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Next item.
9.4 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Yale and District Community Use Facility Operation and Maintenance Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 1758.
I have a mover. Director Adamo, seconder. Director Reed. No comments or questions. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. Next item.
9.5 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Electoral Areas E and H Community Park Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 1759.
Moved by Director Dixon, seconded by Director Dickey. Seeing no questions, all in favor? Any opposed? None, motion's carried. Next item.
9.6 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Area B Community Park Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 1763.
Moved by Director Damo, seconded by Reed. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. Next item.
9.7 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Water Supply Systems Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 1765.
All right, we have 3 motions moved by Director Clute, seconded by Director Dixon. Seeing no questions, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next, motion number 2. Director Lum, seconded by Director Siemens. All in favor? And opposed? Motion's carried. And number 3.
Motion 3, Madam Chair.
Director Facio and second Director Dreesen. All in favor? Motion's carried. Next item.
9.8 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Sewer Systems Regulation Fees and Charges Establishment Bylaw number 1768.
We have a mover. Moved by Director Reed, second by Director Johnson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next item.
Motion number 2.
Oh, sorry. Or is that Director Lowen? Seconded by Director Popov. All in favor? Motion's carried. Next item.
Motion number 3.
Motion number 3. Director Dixon and second Director Barkman. All in favor? Motion's carried.
One more. 9.9 Service Area Establishment Bylaw Amendment Requisition Increase 2025.
Moved by Director Shahal, seconded by Director Stobart. All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. Next item.
Motion number 2.
Moved by Director Horn, seconded by Director Pranger. All in favor? Motion's carried. Next item.
Motion number 3.
Director Clute, seconded by Director Lowen. All in favor? Motion's carried. Next item.
And motion number 4.
Motion number 4. Director Seaman, seconded by Director Dixon. All in favor? Motion's carried.
You did it.
We're just bopping along.
So moving down to section 10, Chair Ross, I believe that there is a script in front of you.
Yes, thank you. All right, pursuant to Part 14, Division 9 of the Local Government Act, this is the opportunity for the FERD Board to hear from the public regarding the one development variance permit listed on the agenda for this meeting. Anyone who believes that their interests are affected by the proposed applications will be given an opportunity to speak. If you have any verbal comments with respect to these permits and you are joining us by Zoom on a computer or smart device, I would ask you to please press the raise hand function. When it is your turn to speak, you will be asked to unmute yourself. If you are joining us on Zoom by phone, please press *9, and this will notify staff that you wish to speak. When you are prompted to unmute yourself, please press *6. Those of you wishing to speak are asked to begin your presentation by providing your name and address, which will be recorded and form part of the official record. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes and confine your remarks to the application at hand.
So 10.1 is Development Variance Permit 2025-01 to reduce setbacks at 46090 Lougheed Highway and Electoral Area C.
Director Stobart?
Yes, Chair Ross, I'd like to recuse myself on this discussion as I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Sales Development Corporation, which is overseeing some of this project.
Thank you.
We'll just give Director Stobart a moment.
Chair Ross, we do have one member of the public on Zoom, joining us on Zoom, and we do have one member of the public here in person. So this would be your opportunity to make a comment with respect to item 10.1. For a member of the public joining us online, just hit that raise hand function if you do have a comment. And to the person joining us, we don't have any comments. Okay. It looks like there's no comments with respect to this item, and we can move along.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have a motion? Moved by Director Wardenberg, Director Adamo. This is EAs only. All in favor? Oh, I forgot to ask for any comments. There wasn't anything on here, but all in favor? Motion's carried.
All right, just
we'll
give
just wait
Director
for-
Stobart, alternate Director Stobart, a moment to return to his chair. So moving down to item 10.2, which is a temporary use permit application for the storage of recreational vehicles at 38482 Bell Road in Electoral Area G.
Do we have a mover? Moved by Director Dickey, seconder. Director Dixon. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, ZAs only. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. Next item.
11.1 is the Invasive Weed Control Program Service Agreement. There is a motion for your consideration.
Have a mover? Don't be shy. Moved by Director Pranger, second Director Gill, all in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. Next item.
11.2 is the Showmox Landfill Operation Contract Extension.
We have a mover? Director Stobart, second by Director Adamo. Oh, sorry, Director Johnson. I'll get you next time. Any comments or questions? Oh, seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. Next item.
11.3 is the proposed earthquake early warning station at the Chilliwack River Valley Volunteer Fire Hall.
Director Johnson, would you like to move this one? Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Dixon. No comments or questions? All in favor? Motion's carried. Next item.
11.4 is the Abbotsford and Agassiz Air Quality Monitoring Stations Licenses of Occupation.
Recommendation.
Moved by
Madam-
Director Fazio, second by Director Gibson. Any comments or questions? No, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next item.
11.5 is covenants relating to the subdivision of land at 41523 Nakaman Island Trunk Road in Electoral Area G.
Director Stobart, seconded by Director Clute.
Sure.
No comments or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next item.
12.1 is the BC Transit Fare Review Initiative. It's an information item, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No? All right, next item.
12.2 is the BC Air Access Program funding application. There is a motion for your consideration.
We have a mover. Director Reed, seconded by Director Gill. No comments or questions, and all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next item.
12.3 is the Boston Bar First Nations grant application request for support.
Thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge that Theo Workington, he's the CEO of the Economic Development Corps for Boston Bar First Nations, is here in attendance. Thank you for coming. Do we have a motion? Moved by Director Johnson, second by Director Lum.
A question.
Yes, Director Gibson.
Yes, thank you. I just have a question on the phrase in the documents. It says, and I'm not speaking in opposition, but just a clarification. It says the Fraser Valley Regional District as a partner, is absolved from any financial or administrative obligations to this project. So what is the nature of being a partner if it's neither financial or administrative? I don't understand that phrase.
Ms. Kinnaman, would you like?
I'd be happy to answer that question, but I think since we have Mr. Urban here in the room, he would be delighted to speak to that.
Please. Thank you, Mr. Urban.
Thank you, and through the chair to Director Gibson. Yes, Boston Bar First Nation isn't able to apply on their own for this funding, so they need a partner to do so. And to your question, what does partner mean? It just means involvement through a representative on the project. So we'll be a participant in a capacitory, in an advisory type role.
Okay, anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item, please.
12.4 is the Rural Transit Needs Assessment and Action Plan update.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Moved by Director Fazio, second by Director Horn. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. Next item.
12.5 is the quarterly report. It's an information item, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No. All right, next item.
12.6 is the 2025 advocacy and LMLGA resolutions.
We have Director, we have a mover by Director. I'm just wondering if I should allow Director Davidson to
I think you
speak
should
first.
get a mover for the
All right.
motion.
Director Clute, moved. Do it seconded by Director Popov. Okay, Director Davidson.
Thank you. So just on the staff report and for the benefit of the other directors, I did share a third resolution I brought forward at EASC and was defeated. But on that topic, I'm still kind of mindful that we did meet with provincial reps at UBCM. We had our 10-minute slot. And since that time, I haven't heard anything. In the staff report, it refers to authentic consultation with various folks. And I'm just curious, I'm kind of struggling with what the time frame for this would be. I'm of course disappointed that we won't get anything before UBCM because of the time management around this. But just I guess through to staff, my question would be for this authentic consultation. I know I'm grateful that staff has flagged this as further research. I'm just curious what staff see as next steps in this.
Sure. Through the chair to Director Davidson. I believe that through the Intergovernmental Relations Committee as well as the EA Advocacy Committee will continue to follow and track and research all of these items that are listed. With respect to this particular item, I think in terms of consultation with the various ministries that have been identified, what we've found in the past is that it's rather important to consult and reach out to those ministries before you ask for more help for them and make sure that they understand or that you understand what it is that you're advocating for. We endeavor very hard to make sure that we have all of the answers to the questions that will be posed when we meet with ministers or the premier at UBCM. And we just feel on this particular one, we don't have a lot of the answers to those questions. From a local government perspective, some of those questions might be, were we to be given this authority, where would we store seized vehicles? We don't have a public works yard. We don't have all of those details worked out. And so one can imagine all of the questions that would come forward at UBCM. And we want to position our elected officials in the best possible light so that they're having a successful 15-minute time with the minister. In addition, we have also received some negative responses from ministries when we've gone in good faith to try to support them and get them those additional resources that they need, the tools that they need, and it's somewhat damaged the relationship. So we're just being cautious on this one. I imagine in the upcoming months, we will follow up with those ministries that we met with last year, inquire whether there's opportunities for us to go over to Victoria to brief some of the new ministers, because I think that the leadership has changed on some of those files. So it's a good opportunity at this point in time. I think outside of UBCM, quite honestly, I think that the speed dating approach of the 15-minute interview doesn't necessarily lend itself well to some of these more complicated files. So those would be the essential next steps, at least in the next 6 months.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I guess for my own benefit, I'm just a case of wait on further developments from like who's initiating. Again, I'm just troubled by the comparative silence from both us and provincial ministries on this topic. So I'm just looking for some warm and fuzzies that something's going to move forward.
Sure. Through the chair to Director Davidson, it would be my intention to follow up with the new Minister Popham for example, with the Ministry of Agriculture, and follow up with the chair of the ALC to follow up on the suggestion that there be an inter-ministry task force struck. There was a lot of positive reception at UBCM on that. And now that they're back in the legislature and well established into their roles, I think that the time is right. The only challenge, of course, that we have at this juncture is that we know that they're going to be in Victoria for most of the time. And so in order for us to schedule time with them, we're already hearing back that those time slots are very limited. So we may have to work with the EA Advocacy Committee, for example, to come up with different advocacy approaches, which might be at the senior staff level. There's nothing barring us from working with the ALC at this point, but getting the Ministry of Agriculture to the table might be a little bit more challenging. And that would be staff-led at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Director Jason?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I had a question about the first resolution. I do agree that it's an important and critical problem that people are experiencing, but I'm just wondering about the approach to be advocating for funding for cleanup when it is a responsibility of a different jurisdiction. So I just don't know. I'm wondering if maybe other EAs who support this motion or staff can speak to sort of why we're going this direction rather than advocating for them to take care of the cleanup. It would be a taxpayer funded, I'm assuming, if I'm understanding correctly, fund and then going back to taxpayers. So I just don't know if it's just adding another level of administration and downloading. So maybe you can explain or convince me otherwise.
Sure. Through the chair to Director Deason, of course, this all came from your EA Advocacy Committee and the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. So I won't necessarily be able to speak to where this originated from. This wasn't a staff originated motion. However, in the past, on the issues of illegal dumping, we haven't had a lot of success in getting provincial resources to address this particular problem in rural areas. Director Makahonic was very successful in the first couple of months of her tenure here in securing a fund of $200,000 for her community to address the problems of illegal dumping and offsetting the costs of cleanup that is usually facilitated through volunteer groups. And, you know, there's often a lot of very wonderful volunteers in these communities that are willing to do this work. But then when faced with the costs of the tipping fees at, say, the landfill, it becomes prohibitive. So that's what this funding was intended for. Unfortunately, or I suppose fortunately for Director Makahonic, but unfortunately for everybody else, those funds were earmarked specifically for the Chilliwack-Vetter River, and so in that area. And so we're hoping that this might provide an opportunity to expand that kind of pilot project, I guess, as it almost became, because it has been successful, and Director Makahonic's community has been able to target some of these sites through the use of volunteers and use that pool of funding.
Director Horn?
Yes, I just want to say, speak strongly in support of resolution number 1. And I hear Director Davidson's concerns. I think it will need to be addressed how we can have more, or ask the province to have more enforcement responsibility. If I could describe the way we've experienced it in Mission, essentially who is responsible for it doesn't seem to matter, because they don't have any resources or seem to be particularly compelled to stop people in the midst of illegal dumping, and they certainly haven't brought any interest in cleaning it up, to Director Easton's part. I drive past a property that was had illegal dumping put on it back in 2005, and another one that was in 2008, and they're both just as they were. And the people who owned the property have moved on, one of them to the universe, and another to another community where they went and did the exact same thing. I would describe what I see here as a first step. And I think it's wise, because I think if we go in there and swing for the fences, we're likely to simply not find much receptiveness at all. I do think we need to start from this place. And I think if we can have a source of funding locally, it's us who are seeing our neighbors when this happens. And I think we'll be compelled to actually do something, which is simply not happening when we compel the provincial agencies, or try to act on issues on our agricultural lands.
Chair Ross, if I can just acknowledge, though, I would like to thank Director Dreesen for pointing out, though, that there is an administrative cost to that, in that adding, you know, the requirement of the local government to hold on to these funds, adjudicate requests, and process all of those. There definitely is. But certainly this is something that's very important to the electoral area directors. And if we were successful, we would try to work towards how we could incorporate some level of recouping of those costs.
Director Dickey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure I understand the discussion here fully, but if there is a sense that the electoral area should be picking up the costs for covering cleanup in the electoral areas, I might point out that, just to choose a number out of the air, probably private land in electoral areas, maybe 3% of the land, and the rest of it's crown. And many of these areas, they really have no relationship to the residents in the electoral area. In my electoral area, there's a place called Jones Lake, or Wallish Lake. It's just a beautiful resource. And if you go up there on a summer weekend, there will be thousands of people crammed in there. 0 of them are from our community. They're from the Lower Mainland. And so we really, we go up there and we help clean up, etc., but we certainly don't consider that as our responsibility.
Director Lam.
Thank you. And that's that. I'm glad Director Dickey brought that up, because I didn't take, I didn't get that from the commentary. And so from the clarification, if it's necessary, from Director Dreesen. What I thought I heard you saying was, is this something that we even have a business in as a regional government? Should it be parked and stay at the province through the Ministry of Environment, for instance, where they could handle all of the administrative overhead, where they could deal with the cleanup groups themselves? I understand your point, and then I understand the counterpoint being made that in a perfect world, that's ideally probably where it would exist. But being that it lands on literally on the front doorsteps of all of our communities, electoral areas, we have to take, out of desperation, if nothing else, some kind of action. We being the dedicated volunteer groups that are doing this. I would say, kind of along similar lines to Director Dickey, there is a level of unfairness on behalf of the province in kind of foisting this upon us. I love to kind of wash my hands of it, cut a $200,000 check and say, you guys all deal with it, plus the overhead, plus all of the administrative costs. I would point out that, through the good graces of the taxpayers of the city of Chilliwack, we've been unfairly subsidizing tipping fees for many years for a lot of these volunteer groups, because it's unpalatable to think that we would charge them tipping fees on top of their volunteer work when they go out and do it. But we recognize that it's important. It's important to the region and for everybody. But I understand both of the points being made. And in an ideal world, it does belong with the province, especially in the fact that disproportionately this is happening on crown land. And we do have some tools if it doesn't happen on crown land. We've got bylaw tools, we've got other enforcement tools that are probably there. But I think in the absence of that, this is probably the best of what we could try and get out of this. And if nothing else, Director Makahonic has helped set a bit of a precedent here that we've got 7 other electoral areas that should get equal access to a fund of $200,000 or more each. So I don't know, my math is we should be expecting a hefty check of over $1 million from the province to cover this soon.
Director Dreesen?
Thank you. I would say go for 2 million, but no, I just wanted to clarify. Yeah, I know. We got to shoot high. No, I was just going to clarify that my comments were not in any way that the electoral areas should be paying for it. It was more that these are provincial or federal lands and their responsibilities. So it seems like we're requesting to take on the problem. But I appreciate Ms. Kinnaman's comments that this is already a problem that we're having to deal with. So I was comforted by her comments and just wanted some clarification on that. And good to hear that Director Makahonic has had some success as well. But so I'm happy to support the motion.
Director Smith?
Through the chair. Yeah, I want to, and Director Lum, so we're quite fortunate and hope that we've had quite a few volunteers, and we actually have gone up to Jones Lake and cleaned up there, some volunteers in Hope. We have a corporate sponsor that pays all our dumping fees for us, so that makes a huge difference. I don't want to tell you because they'd probably phone them. But it is very important, and that you have that thing. So we also worked with Director Adamo and cleaning up the area up there. That should have been a month's job. We had so many volunteers. We got it done in 2 days. Wow. Between equipment donated, volunteers, everything else, cleaned right up and made it so they didn't go back in and make the mess again. That's the whole thing. One thing's about cleaning it up, and there's nothing worse. You come back and 3 months later, it looks like you haven't even been there. So we try to partner with our regional district and make sure we're part of that. And we're very fortunate, like I said, to have a corporate sponsor do the dumping fee.
Director Dixon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a question. I mean, certainly in my area, I get lots of calls about this on the Forest Service roads as well as in the it's all Crown land. When we call, they're often, I've been told actually specifically, oh, it's not big enough yet to clean up. And the other thing is we've had 2 burnt out motorhomes at least that nobody wants to clean up because they aren't insured, and whoever takes it has to cover the costs and things like that. And so it is definitely problematic. My question is, if we're doing this and be actually successful in getting funding, are there liability issues? Are we suddenly now taking this on and organizing volunteers that if somebody trips and breaks their ankle? Like, is that going? Like, I just sort of, because the world is rather bizarre, and I think we want to make sure what we're getting into, possibly.
Through the chair to Director Dixon, great question. The way that we set this up with Director Makahonic was through our grant and aid process. I don't know if our finance team wants to comment, but we do have other community groups that apply for funds through the grant and aid process, and we use that same level of scrutiny around liability and risk. So we're not organizing the volunteers. There are often the groups so far that have come forward are professional businesses that specialize in this kind of work that are seeking to dispose of the materials. So this is not an FERD project. This is literally money that is housed here, and we are required to comply with the rules that were set before us from the province when this money was given to us, so that it was restricted to a specific area and a restricted purpose.
All right. No one else? Right. I just really want to thank staff once again for their incredible hard work on the quick turnaround and the amount of research and preparedness that you've put into this, and making sure that we're really, really well prepared with our advocacy. It kind of reminds me of when we were fighting the power plant SC2, our lawyer advised us never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. I think the same strategy kind of applies with advocacy. So thank you for helping us be well prepared. Seeing no other comments, I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? And motion's carried. Next item.
So then we have motion number 2 for this item.
Moved by Director Horn, seconded by Director Gill. Any comments or questions on this one? No? All in favor? Any opposed? And motion's carried. Next item.
We do have a motion number 3, and I'm just drawing to your attention because I know we had a lot of these multiple motion items. This one is further to one of the advocacy pieces that from the city of Chilliwack. So motion number 3, late breaking. This is to send the letter of support to LMLGA to support the city of Chilliwack's bid on getting an equitable distribution of shelter beds.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Director Popov, second by Director Reed. Any comments or questions on this one? Director Horn.
I just want to go on record as saying, I think that sometimes the media are seeing conversations led by Chilliwack and Vancouver as though they're saying they don't want to do something. And I have to thank Mayor Popov, and I'll refer to you as mayor in this instance, for welcoming Mission into learning from your highly progressive practices in Chilliwack. We agree with you that it's about distributing resources, giving people neighborhoods that are equitable for everybody, and letting people find services close to home. So we're strongly in support of this idea, and speaking of it from the other perspective, I'll say that it can sometimes be a challenge to get BC Housing and other provincial ministries to accept the answer yes, which is a strange place to be. And so we'll continue to work with our regional partners on this, and I think it better serves everybody when we do.
Thank you.
And
Director Popov.
And just briefly, thank you for that comment. I'm not in good standing with the Minister of Housing right now, but I will continue to advocate for this process to move forward, because it's got to be fair and equitable for everybody. And I know with the stats that our staff has put together, we were number 1, you were number 2, and Abbotsford was number 3 as far as the stats, as far as the amount of shelter beds that we have per capita compared to Vancouver. So we are taking the lion's share of work out here. So let's keep pushing this forward. Thank you.
Dr. Smith.
Yeah, so Director Popov too, thank you for what you brought forward too. So actually next week we're actually doing the sod turning for starting our project that we had to get it done right away 5 years ago because the government wanted to start. So it hasn't moved very quickly, and some people said, but we all need to share. We can't expect, and everybody says not in my backyard. Well, why does it have to be in Chilliwack then? We have to all do our part, thing like to say. So thank you for bringing it up and being frank and honest with them. May not have liked you, but.
Director Siemens.
Thank you. I'm actually on good terms with the Ministry of Housing, and we've had a good relationship with well, having said that, on this issue, we've had a good working relationship when it comes to some of the challenges. I mean, I know we don't have enough shelter beds for the problems that we have. Where I do have some challenges with the Minister of Housing is some of the housing starts and how we get measured, but that's a separate issue. But we have respectful conversations on that, and we're pushing back. But on the BC housing front, I guess the challenge that I have is that we know that we have people in our community that need housing. The challenge that I'm having is when I take a look west of us, there are some communities that I don't think have been pulling their weight. And it has been unfortunately, it has ended up in Vancouver or ended up maybe even out in the valley. So I think the intent here is to ensure that some of those areas, especially the urban areas, are taking their fair share. So I just want to be on record of saying that I don't want to torpedo our relationship with BC Housing. I think the challenge that we're finding in our community is that the day space isn't there. People that need supports aren't getting the supports that they need during the day, and it's causing a lot of problems in neighborhoods. I think the other challenge that we have is, and I think they've turned their ear to that, there's people that clearly have some major issues that are not getting the help that they have, and they're left to fend for themselves on the side of the street. And I don't think any part of a humane society actually does that. So the involuntary care discussion, I think, needs to take place, because there are people that clearly are not getting the help that they need. So I do think that there has to be more equitable distribution. I don't think the problem is necessarily in the Fraser Valley. Possibly Langley and west of us, there's issues, I think, more in Metro Vancouver that are seeping their way out here. So I just wanted to be on record of supporting this, but not wanting to torpedo our relationship, because I think that there are some spin-off issues that need to be dealt with at the same time.
Thank you, Director Lum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Director Siemens. I think torpedo would put it lightly. I think we nuked our relationship in one of our meetings last week. But you know what? I think there's so much nuance and also frustration and emotion with the topic. But it's always good to ground ourselves and remind ourselves that we're talking about human beings. And so, to your point, Director Siemens, I think that's a good reminder that nobody in a place that we live with such riches, nobody should be left on the side of the road with no help and no assistance. And this is the kind of the failure and the promise that we've in the conversation that collectively we've been having around housing first and harm reduction, and they're big conversations. And ironically enough, local government has a small piece, maybe the smallest, to play in this. It's more health and mental health, healthcare related housing at the provincial level. We're talking about land use and that kind of stuff. But again, it's one of those challenges and problems that arrives on our doorsteps, and nobody wants to ignore it. And so I think what Chilliwack was trying to do is we're not at all saying trying to point fingers or ignore the issue. I would say we're willing to advocate just as strongly to help you get the supports that you need in your communities. And if we can do that, if we can share in things like Mayor Popov has done already, like share the practices that we've had
that have made us, gain some attention, some traction with the province and getting some of the projects that we've been able to get done. Like we're more than willing to do that. We would extend that same olive branch out to folks in Metro Vancouver and Richmond or Coquitlam, the Tri-Cities that can't seem to get any projects done there apparently, but we'll help them as best we can as well. We'll put our money where our mouths are on this one, but it is good to ground ourselves in the fact that it's people that we're talking about. A shelter should never be the solution. 4 walls and a locked door and permanent housing should be what we endeavor to, not shelters, not emergency shelters, not any of this stuff. So we need to collectively advance the conversation to the point where we're talking about permanent housing in all of our permanent supported housing in all of our communities for anybody who needs it. And then people need to follow up with the rest of that promise, which is the supports and services that those that are really suffering need to get access to. So, but it makes me happy to hear how we're able to have this conversation as directors around this table without pointing fingers at each other. It just reminds me how lucky we are to be at this table and not at some of the other ones that are trying to have this challenging discussion and not doing nearly as good a job at being respectful of each other.
Thank you. Well said. Director Lowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I couldn't agree more with my friend here, Chilliwack. One point I just want to caution us a little. It's a little problematic for me is to measure on the basis of beds per capita. If we can suspend all belief and all possibilities and imagine a community in our midst that would have no homeless people, but your logic, Mr. Mayor, Director, would have that community also have shelter beds for presumably no homeless people. So I would like to think we can have another way or different way of comparing or measuring, I should say, what is fair, what is equitable.
Thank you. Director Clune.
Thank you. I would argue that it's probably no secret that BC housing has its own challenges and capacity issues are throughout this province. And I think relationships are key, and any partner in a relationship should be able to keep each other accountable. And I would argue that it's an honest and a compassionate approach when we send a message from our region saying we can do better across the province. So I'm happy to support this today. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. Next item.
12.7 is the electoral area flood infrastructure policy update and gap analysis, an information item, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No? Seeing none, next item, please.
12.8 is the framework for consideration of soil-related development applications and referrals.
We have a motion. Director Adamo, second Director Wardenberg. Seeing Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to update the other municipal directors, at East, I raised some comments around the framework itself. I think the takeaway from staff was they'd make some adjustments, and I'm not seeing them in this version of the framework. Specifically, it was around options for board consideration, forward applications with comments where 2B, there are reservations or serious concerns regarding broader community impacts, including impacts on adjacent properties and cumulative flood hazards. I think my intent at the time in East was that this would also be a candidate for refuse to forward applications, simply because, as the staff report says, ALC doesn't have the expertise to evaluate drainage at the end of the day. So in my mind, it didn't make much sense to forward a comment about concerns around drainage to an agency that didn't have the expertise to address those concerns and would just simply refuse anyway. So I think that's where I was coming from. I'm not sure if there was a miscommunication. I guess where I'm coming from this is thinking to future referrals coming before ESC and the board, if the staff de facto or default recommendation is to forward, something where there's concerns around drainage on local properties or cumulative floodplain, my preference would be is that an option should be put forward that we can refuse at that juncture as well. Of course, we can always go against the staff recommendations, but that creates its own challenges sometimes. I prefer to have it baked into the framework.
Ms. Kinman, any
Yeah, I think
comments?
we'll just turn things over to Mr. Daniluz on this topic.
Okay.
With the consent of the chair, I'll invite our manager of planning, Caitlin Hipwell, to address the question.
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Davidson. Yes, staff did receive your comments at committee earlier this month, and we revised the framework. So the framework that you see attached to tonight's agenda is revised in that it creates additional discretion for the board to refuse to forward an ALC application in the case where not only there may be an area-wide fill application, but also where it's deemed that there is incomplete information or inadequate professional assurances related to the application itself.
Then I'm just still perplexed as to why 2B, reservations around impacts on adjacent properties and cumulative flood hazards is still on the forward back to ALC with comments section.
Director Davidson, could you give us a page number just to help the committee or the board?
Framework for consideration, it's a separate attachment to the agenda. I'm getting it off the website. It's the I think it's referred to as an appendix, framework for consideration of soil-related development applications and referrals. Okay. It is 2B, options for board consideration, lower left-hand side of the page.
Okay, so for the rest of the board, I understand. Thank you, Director Siemens. It's page 378. So we'll just give staff a moment to.
Yep.
Thank you. If the board wishes to refer the framework back to staff, we'll work with Director Davidson and bring back some further revisions next month.
I'll make that motion then, please.
Moved by Director Davidson. Do we have a seconder? Director Dixon? Yes. Yeah. It's
a
full board. Seeing no other comments, all in favor of the referral motion? Opposed? Nope. One opposed. All right, I think the motion's carried.
Moving to 12.9, which is major official community plan and zoning amendments to facilitate the redevelopment of 52285, 52375, 52425, 52445 Yale Road in Electoral Area D into a residential subdivision with commercial and multifamily land uses.
Just before we move on, Director Clute just has a statement.
Thank you. To avoid any potential conflict of interest, a family member did own one of the subject properties, and I was involved with the transaction, so I'll step out.
Okay, so there is a motion for your consideration.
Moved by Director Dickey. Do we have a seconder? Director Wardenberg. No comments or questions? All right. All in favor? None opposed? Motion's carried.
Okay, we'll just give Director Clute a moment. So moving down to item 12.10, we have Steward Logistics, Inc. Towers Telecommunications Referral at 53294 Yale Road in Electoral Area D.
You have a mover? Director Dickey, seconder, Director Johnson. Seeing no speakers, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next item.
12.11 is temporary changes to liquor licensing at Sasquatch Inn in Electoral Area C.
We have two motions. Do we have a mover for motion number one? Director Clute, seconded by.
I thought you moved it.
You can't move and second it. No, I would too, but we'll take Director Clute for seconder. No speakers? All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. Motion number 2. Sorry, who is that? Director Lum. Seconded by Director Dixon. All in favor? Motion's carried. Next item.
12.12 is lounge area endorsement liquor license application for Chestnut Springs Cidery, 1331 Janovic Road in electoral area H.
Moved by Director Dixon, seconded by Director Bartman. No speakers, all in favor? Motion's carried. Next item.
12.13 is development permits issued in 2024 by the Director of Planning and Development. It's an information item.
Any questions? Doesn't look like it. Next item.
Next item is also an information item, 12.14, which is preliminary interpretation of a large landslide complex at Boston Bar.
Any questions? No? All right, next item.
And 12.15, which is evacuation route guide for electoral area E.
Any questions on this one? No. Next item.
Okay, for items for information and correspondence, we have 14.1.
Letter from our own Director Smith. No wishes to speak to this one? No?
Okay, so then moving to reports. You do want to speak to?
Yeah, so so reading the letter and thing like this, I want to read it again. It's like 5 people in Hope. If we arrested them, 70% of our crime would drop off. And I'm just saying different number in different communities. A smaller one like Director Pranger's there, she might have 2 and Harrison might have 1, but they got to start somewhere. This is crazy. Like they're so repetitive, some of these people. So I'm just hoping we get an answer from them and just share it with especially our smaller communities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item.
Reports. Moving to reports by board directors.
Anyone? Oh my goodness, I think this is first time ever. It's no reports by board directors. All right.
So moving to public question period for items relevant to the agenda, we'll just turn things over to our corporate officer, Jamie Van Ness.
Thank you. We do have one member of the public joining us by Zoom, and this would be your opportunity to ask a question relevant to the agenda. I'll just go to see if our one member of the public joining us has any questions. While we're just waiting for our one member of the public, I will note that we have received one question, and this is with respect to item 11.1 on our agenda, which was the invasive weed control program service agreement. I'm just going to read out the question that we received. It says, could you also please approve some of this funding or additional funding for the Nature Trust of BC, since they have many priorities in the FERD? And they also have a land management team that removes invasive species and places Indigenous plants in their place. They also have a current fundraising effort to preserve most of the east side of Lake Erock. Since the FERD Parks Master Plan 2014 to 2024 priorities were to acquire and preserve, and we are not aware of any new additions, it would be great to support the Nature Trust. And this question comes from Mike Armstrong in Lake Erock in Area C.
All right. Would staff like to speak to that?
Sure. I'm just looking over at Lance Lilly. I'm sure he could answer that question.
Thank you for the question and through the chair. I'll say the budget for the FERD's invasive weed control program is to focus on the 4 species that are a priority for the regional district. And these are the ones that are found along public roadsides. We do not typically provide treatment found on private property. That said, we are continuing to pilot a limited cost share program for knotweed control that is found on private property. And landowners could be eligible for up to 50% of the cost of knotweed treatment for up to $500. So if the landowner here is interested, they can reach out to us and we can have further discussions. I'll also add that there are organizations such as Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation, Pacific Salmon Foundation, that specifically do provide treatment for, or specifically provide funding for habitat restoration works. And I believe conservancy organizations are eligible to apply. So there's additional funding through those organizations if this person is interested in pursuing those.
Thank you for that answer.
And it doesn't appear that we have any more questions from members of the public.
Great. Okay, thank you. Next item.
So looking for a resolution to close the meeting.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Director Facio, second Director Dreesen, all in favor? Motion is carried.
Okay, if you just give us 3 or 4 minutes to set up the room for our closed session.